the sun on the rise. If you open your eyes, you can change your view. Walk a city block in these shoes. Something
We'll figure out how it works as we go. I'm going to go through the rules and procedures to begin tonight. Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission, other than site plans and preliminary subdivision plats. The Commission's decision to approve or deny a site plan or preliminary subdivision plat is the final decision by the City. Unless the applicant appeals to the City Council, please contact the City Clerk or Community Development Department staff for details on council hearings. The applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. The applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. Hearing will then be closed and the Commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with a recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or members of the Commission request that the item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. City of Des Moines, please provide accommodations to individuals or groups with disabilities and encourages participation in city government. To better serve you and possible, please notify us at least 3 business days in advance at 515-283-4209. Should special accommodations be required, assistive listening devices are available for meetings in the council chambers. Plan and Zoning Commission meetings are broadcast on Mediacom Cable Channel 7 for customers with that service. Broadcast is also streamed live in real time on the City of Des Moines website at www.desmoinesgov.org. Click on Watch Live link. Do we have a motion on minutes?
I have a correction.
Will, correction.
On page 49.
I talk about some matters. The last sentence, please correct it to read, he regrets having to call a member of staff on the carpet because staff has had to use a reason to allow something that, in his opinion, does not make common sense. Does that... Kathy? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have that, Kathy? Okay. Anything else? Vicky's abstaining. Anything else? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? CJ's abstaining. Dory, Vicky, Jan. That's it. Sorry. Thank you. We have so far 2 items on the consent agenda. I'll read them and then we'll see if they're going to stay there. Item number 1 is a request from David Wright, 4421 Franklin Avenue for a vacation of a 50-foot by 190-foot segment of adjoining land purchased for public right-of-way to extend 45th Street north of Franklin Avenue. Anyone here opposed to that item? Okay. Item 2 is a request from Kenworth Mid-Iowa Inc. owner, represented by Mike Sullivan, for review and approval of a site plan under design guidance for vehicle display lots on property located at 4111 Delaware Avenue to allow construction of a new 5,750 square foot parts storage building accessory to an existing truck service and sales use. Anyone opposed to that item? Thank you. CJ is moving to consent. Use mics. Says Kathy, please.
Move to consent. Item 1 and 2.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Looks like unanimous. Items 1 and 2 are through, and so if you're here on those, you may stay or leave. We're going to jump to item 5. There's been a request by the applicant, I believe, to continue to the 19th, which is our next meeting. Any comments from staff or anybody about that item? Anybody here for that item? No? Ted's going to move
To continue.
Okay. We have a motion to move continue item 5 to the 19th. Those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Nobody opposed. Okay, so item 5, we're continuing, which leaves 3, 4, and 6. So we'll get to item 3. Request from Robert Mulvihill, Jr. for rezoning a property located at 1139 24th Street. Such property is owned by Ballard's Glass and Screen Service. We've heard this before and we continue to tonight for further work. So, Jason, do we have further work done?
Yes. Chair, members of the Commission, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. Just to quickly refresh your memory, subject property in the Drake neighborhood, 24th Street, University to the north. You can see, kind of make out the area. It's zoned R160, and there's some other residential zoning districts scattered throughout here, but most of it's R160. Until you get further north to University Avenue, then you have some NPC, PUD, and closest to this property is a couple lots up, some C1. Quickly show pictures since everybody's familiar. Existing building. Response cards may be circulating. Response map. Before I show any of the graphics, just to refresh everybody why the item was continued. The applicant had met with neighbors within the 250 feet, but needed more opportunity to meet with the neighborhood association. They did work together to come up with a list of conditions that both parties agreed to with regard to certain uses not being, or uses being prohibited. Those are identified in the staff report. There's 8 there. So we're looking at a limited NPC zoning classification request. There still are a very long list of uses allowed in NPC. Just to refresh everybody's memory, this is a case where we have a property that has a use in it. We have a gentleman or an individual that's looking to buy it from the existing user. That user hopes to move off-site in the near future. And so we're not at a particular point in time where it's a vacant use, where they've lost grandfathering rights, and that there's no ability to continue the commercial use of the property. It's more of a working ahead to try to avoid having to keep an occupant in it. The zoning ordinance has a 6-month lap period, and then the grandfathered use, that right to that expires. So that's the purpose of the request. We, the staff, looked through this. As you can tell from the agenda, it would require an amendment to the future land use plan. We looked at that. We also looked at the Drake neighborhood plan, which talks about having commercial uses along the major corridors. And considering the large gamut of uses that can be allowed in the NPC district, we do have 8 that have been suggested as being eliminated, but there's still a very long list of uses that it's very open-ended with no end user in sight. Also, the other thing that we factored in is that this is a standalone parcel. It doesn't adjoin any other commercial uses. Putting that all together, we are recommending denial of the request. The applicant would have the ability within a year, if the council does eventually deny the request, to seek a use variance from the zoning board of adjustment. That would give them time to look at actually identifying a particular use that conditions could be customized around that particular use, and then also it wouldn't be as a long-term thing. We got to keep in mind that while we may have a person in front of us today that has done a good faith effort in the community, It doesn't mean that they're going to own that property continuously forever, and zoning is in place much longer than ownership is in place. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jason? Thank you. Will the applicant please step forward? What's your name and address, please?
It's Robert Mulvell Jr. My address is 3114 Cumming Road, Cumming, Iowa.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I have plans to fix up the building. I brought a picture of what I had in mind. Just fix up the appearance and rent it to people. And the purpose of changing the zoning is to get a wider pool of tenants that would want to rent the building. Regarding your option one, where I would request zoning, request permission for each tenant that moves in. I mean, that's possible, but it's kind of a hassle for me to do that. And plus, it kind of makes my property less attractive because I have to assume zoning will be approved, and in the meantime, somebody else could rent a different building, and it just kind of adds another step to it. And the other option of converting the existing buildings at 1145 24th Street that I own and 1147 24th Street into commercial as well. That's possible, but it's kind of like this building where those buildings were designed as residential properties, and there wouldn't really be much use for them besides if I just use the land for them, if I wanted to use it for parking for this building. And that seems like it'd be more contrary to the Des Moines 2020 plan, where you're preserving the character of the community. So I guess I still think changing the zoning to be NPC would be in the best interest for myself and the community.
Any questions for Robert? Thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Name and address, please.
I'll sign this sign-in sheet here in a second. Derek Gord, President, Drake Neighborhood Association, 2422 Drake Park. We really like NPC in Drake Neighborhood. I've heard it called the parking restriction zoning because people request it when they want to get waivers for parking. That's not why we like it. We like it because we have a very mixed-use neighborhood. We have these pockets where you suddenly have a commercial property that was built right on top of the sidewalk, right in between a bunch of houses. That this happens in our neighborhood. When you look at this property, it actually really is a commercial property. It was built as a commercial property. It's zoned R160. That's really not the right zoning. We in the Drake Neighborhood Association do not really like non-conforming zoning. It's one of the reasons why we're against keeping the zoning as it is. We could actually do the R160 with variances for particular buildings or offices as renters came in. I suppose that would be up to the owner to do. But I would say as a neighborhood, what we do is, I think what city staff was talking about is we look at not this owner, but who's going to own it 2 owners from now, and what are they going to do to that, and how do we encourage people to keep up with this property? So one of the reasons why we like NPC is, we do have this mixed use, but also NPC has a site plan process, which, when used effectively, basically encourages people, developers, to come in, think about it, put out a plan to the community, and sort of talk about how their changes or whatever they're doing is going to, lots of feedback, how it's going to impact things. It really encourages that sort of cooperation between developers and owners and commercial owners and residents, which we really appreciate in the Drake neighborhood. So I don't know what you would zone this property. It is between 2 houses. We don't want to see, I guess if these were vacant land, I could see, well, let's put this as a C1. I'd still like an NPC there. It'd be great to have a mixed-use building there because of the site. It's right across from a hotel. It's right around the corner from some C1, some other NPC. But that's not what we have. What we have are 2 actually not bad-looking houses. They are multifamily. It's built to single family that are currently used as multifamily. It's the Drake neighborhood's dream that every built to single family will eventually be returned back to a single family. I'm not sure how realistic that is, but you know, we do like downsizing of the built to single families, and we like to preserve that housing stock. That's why we're not really in favor of creating the large zonings. And when you have these, but it does create that issue when you have these isolated zonings. I'm here to speak in favor because I think NPC is probably, with the right restrictions, the 8 that we've outlined or some that we've used before. If there are others that would be recommended, I think that's something we could discuss. But we like the NPC because we think it's right for the neighborhood and right for the area. And so with that.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Question, please.
Yes.
You heard the staff presentation on this, and the presentation that the requested zoning would fly in the face of the Drake neighborhood plan.
Mm-hmm. I was involved
You're
in
the
that plan
president
process.
You're the president of the
Mm-hmm.
Drake neighborhood. Does that put you in how do you respond to that?
I'm a big defender of the plan. I was involved in the plan process. When we did the plan and we talked about the changes to the 2020 character, we looked at places that were zoned commercial, or we looked at some of those things. This is zoned as R160. It's a small lot. If you see the lot, I can almost guarantee you it's something we did not think of at the time that we were making this plan, that this particular lot would ever come back, or it's something that we probably would have written in. What we did talk, though, is we talked later that we, when it came to NPC, that we thought NPC on an as-needed basis where it was appropriate was something that the Drake neighborhood supported. So you're right. It doesn't, the plan that talks about our zoning requests in this area does not talk about commercial. That's absolutely right. However, I think that that was more by omission than because we wanted a specific zoning here. Does that answer?
Any other questions for Derek? Thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Anyone opposed to the application? I don't see any, so we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners? Ted?
Just have a question for Jason or Mike. Is residential allowed in NPC?
Yes, single family and above.
And then this is a question that I asked last time. Does this seem like spot zoning? Is this, are we, because it's already a commercial building, are we spot zoning it to commercial? I guess I'm surprised. I'm not surprised at the city's recommendation. I understand it. I guess I'm a little surprised at the Drake neighborhood's position on it. Given that all the uses that go along with NPC, and the fact that if it's rezoned now, if it ends up being a neat little print shop, I don't think anything precludes that from becoming that. It would require a variance. But I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with rezoning it so it won't be a hassle. I'm a little uncomfortable with rezoning it to make it worth more. I think that the zoning is there to protect the neighborhood. So I guess I tend to agree with the city's recommendation, with the staff's recommendation. The 2 houses to the north, if he already owns them, I think if it was all maybe proposed to be rezoned, I think that would be appropriate. There's nothing that says that those houses would need to be torn down or anything else if that was the case, but it just seems like we're putting an NPC right in the middle of R160, and I think I agree with staff that that's inappropriate.
CJ?
I think this particular item deserves a little common sense. This is a property that has been there. The Drake neighborhood acknowledges that they have a mixed-use neighborhood. This size of a lot, is it rebuildable? Is it good for anything else? And as long as the neighbors directly on each side don't have a problem with it, I don't have a problem with the use variance on it because it's established. There doesn't seem to be a lot of things, other things you can do besides let the property become ugly. And I just would encourage common sense use on some of these things.
Well, I don't believe we're here to consider a use variance. I think we're here to consider rezoning the property.
Can I have a motion one way or another? Sure, go ahead, Greg.
I live just on the west side of Drake, and so my wife and I frequent this area often, and I love this area, the whole sort of area around Drake, and in particular, you know, there's a significant difference between the west side of Drake where they built some new housing and things, and you can really tell on the west side that parking, you know, drove a lot, excuse my pun, drove a lot of the solutions. And, you know, when you go down to the sort of southeast side of Drake in the area we're talking about, whether you're going to Mars Cafe or Woody's Barbecue Joint or the theater there, the Varsity, it's very common for me, or even Drake Diner, you know, I have to park on the road because the little parking lot in front of Drake Diner is too big. Or if I'm going to the theater, you know, we park on the road. And we purposely don't go park in the neighborhood. We park somewhere in the commercial area because I want to walk by those places. And I feel more comfortable or whatever. And so I think the idea, it's so eclectic and it makes so much sense in these neighborhoods that we don't want the parking to drive the solution. We just really don't. And I think it's very unique, but I think that's part of the richness in this type of neighborhood. So, you know, I would be a huge proponent of allowing this to happen in a disagreement with staff for those reasons.
TJ? Anybody else? Motion, anybody?
I'll move staff.
Ted's moving staff, which is opposed to the rezoning. Any discussion about that? Okay. We need to break this down, A first, and then B and C together. Is that how you usually do it? So I'm going to do it. A first. Determination as to whether the proposed amendment is in conformance with the Des Moines 2020 Community Character Plan. And staff says no.
So the existing, or the proposed zoning is not in conformance with the existing 2020 comp plan.
Everyone got that? Those in favor of that, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Greg and CJ. Oh, and Jan. Okay. Okay, and so that passes. So we agree with staff, and part B and C. B is recommends denial of amendment to the Des Moines 2020 Community Character Plan to revise the existing future land use designation from low-density residential to commercial pedestrian-oriented neighborhood node. And C recommends denial of the requested rezoning. So, B and C, those in favor of that, of staff, raise your right hand. Opposed?
Jan.
6-6. So we need to try again.
I'm
sorry, what does that mean?
It's a tie, and a tie means it fails. So we need to have another motion. I mean, we could send it on, I suppose.
Mr. Chair, could you discuss the other options that are available to the applicant?
Staff?
Well, right now, it's a rezoning application, so the commission can either follow that up with another motion to approve the zoning and see if that passes. Other than, I mean, the commission does need to make a recommendation to the city council, so that's the application that's in front of you tonight, which is to rezone the property.
Can I ask a question?
Greg, go ahead.
I'd just be curious if anyone on the board that voted in favor of the recommendations, if there were additional uses that you were concerned about, or if there were other things, is there any discussion there, or no? That may change your vote.
Anybody? I think Ted said that he might be more inclined if the other two properties that he owned were included in the NPC, even though that doesn't preclude them being changed, but that was one thing.
It's not the agenda item.
We can't rezone additional property
Right.
tonight, though.
No.
We'd have to renotice.
My thought is that this property doesn't seem to create an issue, other than I don't want to rezone before there's something going into the property. We have had issues before where we have had to deny because there was nothing going in. They just wanted a rezoning. And in order to, and I don't mind even NPC, it's just that I don't want to see it rezoned ahead of time.
Anybody have a notion of?
I just have a comment, Greg, and it has to do with the Holiday Inn Express across the street from this building. I'm not sure if that's a pro or a con. Just for the fact, there's an empty building, but at the same time, I'm thinking, what's the alternative if this does not pass? It stays empty and it stays, I know we're here to vote on zoning, but I feel that we should also take in consideration the fact that there are a restaurant just a rock's throw away, if you will, and of course the hotel across the street. And I do agree with Greg, it's part of the streetscape anymore, these buildings looking the way they do, so I don't know if that helps anybody, and I'm sure if it helps me, but those are comments I wanted to make.
Okay.
Mike or Jason, please tell me if I have interpreted this incorrectly, but a tie is a loss, or in their case a loss, or a victory for the motion going to council. We're an advisory body. Council's going to do what they do. But in this case, I'm not opposed to a commercial use in this building, and I understand that it is a commercial building that somebody built not taking into account the zoning probably before any of that existed. But it's my understanding that their next step would be to go to the Board of Adjustment and say, we have a tenant, we'd like a variance, and we don't speak for the Board of Adjustment, but those kinds of things get granted all the time. And I think that's what ought to happen. I don't think it's our job here necessarily to increase the pool of renters for a landlord trying to speculate on a property. I'm all for profit. I'm in business myself. But I think the appropriate course here is to get a tenant and get a variance. And if there was a contiguous zoning that was the same, it was MPC next door, I wouldn't have a problem in the world with it. But that's the way I see it. Is any part of that incorrect in my assumptions?
Those would be the next steps if the zoning were denied. I guess the question would be, is there anyone that wants to make a motion to recommend approval of the comp plan amendment and the zoning? Is there anyone that wants to make a motion to recommend approval of the comp plan amendment or the zoning?
It's the opposite of the staff rec.
Yes.
So it's the converse of staff.
Yeah, I'll offer up a motion to approve the applicant's request with the staff's recommendations of the, I can't remember how many, but the precluded uses. Yeah,
But approving the zone.
approving to going to MPC.
Well, we've already passed A, so that this is for B and C. Okay? So we have a motion for approval of the zoning. Is everyone clear? Ted?
Now, with the prohibited uses as outlined?
Correct, yes.
Any further discussion about that?
Yeah, what's the difference between that and what we've already voted on?
It's the opposite.
Nothing, it's just.
It's
to
the
see
exact
if
opposite.
Someone might be swayed differently. There's no difference.
I just have a question. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. Isn't Mr. Mulvihill the proposed purchaser of the property? He doesn't want to raise the value of it. He wants to he wants to put a different business in there, and the glass company wants to move, correct? So the tenant is already kind of known? You said you wanted to, some of them said you wanted to wait till the next tenant is known? Isn't that, don't we know?
He doesn't, he's just going to own it, he doesn't have.
Oh, he doesn't know what tenant he's going to rent it to. Okay, I just wanted to be clear. He doesn't know the use yet. Okay.
One other thought I'd throw out to everyone, and I know, Ted, you've mentioned this a couple times, that if all three properties together, you might be more in favor of this. That would actually give you more congestion and more cars, so I'm not sure adding more properties to the MPC is necessarily a better thing.
Well,
But
I guess my point is that there's no NPC contiguous to this. That's my point. I don't think it'd be a good idea to tear those houses down and do something with it either.
Why don't we try this? Why don't we see how this vote goes? So, B and C in favor of rezoning. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Could get the same 6. 3 here. 5.
You voted against the zoning before, and you're not in
She's
support
just
of
gonna
approval?
make it so there's a vote. Okay, so there's 5 for that one. Opposed? Raise your right hand. Should be 7. Motion is defeated.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to say one of the motivations that I had for voting the way I did was the fact that the neighborhood worked a long time on this neighborhood plan, and the Drake neighborhood is very complex with any number of different uses and so forth. And I do feel that if we make an exception to the plan now, in a neighborhood as complex as this, there's a question about the integrity of the plan down the road.
Well, it heads on to council with our recommendation for denying.
And doesn't the council have to have a certain number?
Yeah, I believe council has to have a supermajority.
So you know that.
Okay, we're going to go on to item number 4, request from 7 of 7 LLC, represented by Dan Norris for review and approval of a site plan under design guidelines in NPC districts on property located at 2837 Ingersoll Avenue to allow site and building modifications related to tavern use of the property. The subject property is owned by George Ernst.
If I could, very quickly, for the applicant's benefit that was here, we will go ahead and forward the, I guess, actions taken by the commission tonight to the Plan and Zoning Commission. It's essentially a no recommendation
No, the council.
to the council. And so the council would set hearing on their second meeting of September, and the first meeting of October would be their hearing on it, and it will not have a recommendation from the commission ultimately. Thank you.
Which requires what?
There's no recommendation, it will be a simple majority vote of the council.
The subject property for this item is on the north side of Ingersoll in the 2800 block. The aerial identifying the property. Some photographs of the site. Previous had been the Suzette's Candy Store. This is Ingersoll Avenue looking towards the west. This is the back of the property looking towards the south and west. And then kind of along the rear property line looking westward. Response map, there's a card that's being passed around. You don't see yellow too often on our maps, but the individual sent that back. What they'd indicate is they'd like a privacy fence. They didn't indicate support or opposition. So yellow, I guess, is kind of yield or slow down.
They didn't circle either on.
Right. So we don't know.
And those are sent to property owners?
Yes. So here is the site plan showing the existing building, parking in the rear, the streetscape up front, building elevation. The concept that the applicant is going to is a tavern. I'm going to zoom out and see if it'll, there we go. So what this is showing their plan, I think it might be easier to pick it up on the floor plan, but what they're proposing to do is to open the front of the building up and have a kind of an enclosed patio space. So that there'd be kind of an internal wall, and then this is the proper, or the wall proper of the front of the building. Refacing the existing sign, that's what this box indicates up the top. I'll go ahead and jump to the staff recommendation and walk through that, and that kind of explains our position on things. We are recommending approval. We do have some conditions. One is our standard compliance with all administrative comments in the Permit Development Center. Condition number 2 is provision of note on site plan that all rooftop mechanical equipment shall be architecturally screened from public view with materials that are compatible with the building. This is kind of a standard comment that we put on site plans. Provision number 3 is a note on the site plan that states the maximum square footage dedicated to service area, restrooms, and any other use that triggers required off-street parking shall not exceed 3,280 feet. And what that relates to is the parking on the site. They have 13 stalls on site, and then in the NPC district, you get a count adjoining on-street, which we estimate that there's 1 stall here that would be a conforming stall. So 14 stalls. With the layout that they're proposing, they're only required to have 13 off-street parking spaces. And what we want to do is to ensure that areas that wouldn't be counted, let's say, for instance, this is a storage area, which are parking requirements, that square footage not calculated at. We just don't want to see that term converted to, say, a service area, or I mean, seating that would increase the capacity, or maybe a kitchen that would increase the parking capacity for the site. So that's the point of that note, is just to kind of lock in the parking needs for the development. Number 4 is provision of a note on the site plan and building elevations that state the installation of any temporary patio enclosure or permanent windows and door in the front facade is subject to an amendment approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And what we want to do there is just make sure that down the road, if they decide that, let's say during the winter, they want to do some temporary enclosure here where you have, I can't think of a better word, but draped, but that's not what I'm really getting at. It's more like a temporary, more like open plastic and stuff. We want to make sure that there's a review process, that we get a look at that from an architectural standpoint. And then, of course, obviously, if the game plan would change for the building, whether it's this user or future user, and they want to put windows or a door back in, we want to have that reviewed, that architecture reviewed through a public process. Note number 5 is conversion of the southern parallel stall to a compact parking stall. The zoning ordinance allows for up to 30% of your parking to be compact stalls, which are smaller. There is adequate, or there's enough room to meet our minimum width for drive aisle requirements. But we felt this is a good opportunity to make this a little bit smaller and just give it a little more better flow through the area. Number 6 is the existing sage along the southern perimeter of the building shall be retained and plantings moved or added to accommodate the changes in entrance location. And that this work shall be coordinated with the Ingersoll Grand Self-Supported Municipal Improvement District Board. The Ingersoll streetscape, the plantings, I think this was just an oversight on their design team, but the building actually, the sidewalk sets back from the building, which is on the property line. So these plantings that are in front of the building currently are in the right-of-way and are part of the Ingersoll streetscape project. So what we're getting at is, instead of the shrubs, they're proposing that these be repositioned and filled in as needed, just to ensure continuity with the streetscape project in the area. And 7, any walk connecting the public sidewalk to the front door shall be constructed of concrete and scored to match the Ingersoll streetscape pattern. And again, that's just to accommodate the change of door location. Right now, it's in the center of the building, so we'll be moving down here. We just want to make sure that that scoring pattern is continued on off of the public walk. And then number 8 is provision of a 6-foot-tall privacy fence and shrub plantings along the rear property line. I just want to make sure that there's some screening in the back to that card that is going around. That's what that card is speaking to. It's the owner back here. And our normal buffering requirements require a 6-foot-tall fence and buffering plantings. So that is the staff recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Jason, can you put up a picture in the parking lot looking north? Do you have a picture of that?
North, I can look in the file. I'm not sure that I do. I don't have a north. The best one I have would be probably this. Kind of gives you a sense of the north property line.
There was a shed there that was removed. And, well, I'll ask the applicant.
Okay.
Anything else for Jason? Greg?
I have a couple questions, Jason. On the site plan, if you could put that up. First question is, and I realize staff will dig into this, but I'm just kind of curious how they're going to get the trash dumpster out when they've locked it in a corner with all the parking places.
Sure. I would assume that they would be coordinating their pickup times at off-peak times. There's always a challenge when you have these urban infill sites to make it all work.
Okay.
But I think that's, in this case, given the site constraints, it was a reasonable.
Second question is, do you think those two parallel spaces, especially the one to the south, is really reasonable to allow access for the cars to still get back out to the south? Or are most people just going to go out through the Palmer's Deli overflow, and is that okay? Are there cross-use easements, and can people do that?
I would assume that most people would utilize Palmer's to the north or south. I know from my past experience with Ingersoll that Palmer's and the actual owner of this site, George Chris, had worked together. I don't know the formality of their agreement, but there is, for instance, there is a sign on this post right here that faces, this is the subject property, that faces back to Palmer's proper, that actually is the Palmer sign that says additional parking this way. So there is some level of agreement.
Is that something worth getting more firm, or is that not a huge concern for staff?
I think it's just the nature of a built-out historic urban environment.
And I guess the last thing is that a parking space just on the north side of the building? And the reason I ask is because that new exit path comes out there.
Here?
And so you really couldn't exit through a parking place. And I was just kind of wondering how all that sort of flushes out back there. Do you know?
Which one?
Well, if you come out that exit path heading north, the new concrete sidewalk there.
Here, yes.
And then are you supposed to turn left and walk through a parking place, or?
That's not, we didn't
That's
count
not.
that as a stall.
You did not. All right.
Yeah, that's not in the calculation.
Okay. That's all I have.
Anything else for Jason? Thank you. Can we hear from the applicant, please? Name and address.
Michael Gaunt, landscape architect with Bishop Engineering, 3501 104th Street. The site plan that you have before you, we have been through the staff comments. We don't have an issue with any of them. Just to clarify, you are correct that stall immediately to the north of the building is intended as a walkway. I might consider just going ahead and showing that as striped so people don't park there. The only other issue that has come up would be the plants at the front of the building. We have no problem putting the sage back in. I just know that during construction, plants are going to get trampled, concrete's going to come out. We'll make sure it looks the same when it's done.
Any questions for Michael?
I have a question, please. I'm looking at the front elevation concept plan, and Jason, could you put up the existing for me, please? Do you have one that's head-on rather than at an angle?
I don't think so.
In the meantime, I'd like to ask this question. Is the design to offset the new front of the building behind the existing facade?
Can you put up that floor plan?
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to the floor plan. So the existing facade is this line right here. So those windows would come out, and the patio's just behind the current.
I see. Let's go to the existing photograph, please. I want to call your attention to this very cool entrance feature. I don't know if this building was built in the 1920s or the 1930s, but whenever it was built, they added this really very interesting Art Moderne or streamlined entrance feature. It's metal, isn't it? I don't know if it's aluminum or whatever, but it's a metal feature, is it not?
I'm gonna.
Sorry? Aluminum. I think that that the Ingersoll area is very eclectic. It has a lot of interesting new design, but it also has a lot of 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s design to it. And the neighborhood uses the streetcar as a kind of theme, a streetcar, you know. And so not only is there new stuff, but also there's a suggestion of the historical past. And this particular feature is part and parcel of that. And my recommendation is that you retain that feature. You can still punch out the windows and achieve the same kind of design that you're looking for, but you can, and you would even accentuate the invitation to visit this building by retaining this very distinctive entryway.
I will have Dan from the ownership group address the architectural elevations. They're a little more well-versed in what their plans are for the...
Name and address, please.
Dan Norris, 2323 Southeast 7th Street. For the plan up front there, that wasn't in the plan to keep that there, but definitely we can work with their plans around there and everything that is. I mean, this is going to be more of a, this is not going to be a dive bar. This is my background is resort management. I come from Sedona, Arizona, Flagstaff, 25 years of it. And it's going to be 30s and above bar. So definitely, if you guys have any suggestions on the front of it, anything like that, we'd be more than glad to welcome it in there. So.
Tim?
Dan, I don't know what the smoking regulations are in the state of Iowa, but I'm told, and I bet you know, if there's table service on the patio, the proposed patio, then smoking is not allowed?
It is not allowed.
Okay, so smoking won't be allowed on that patio?
No, sir. No smoking. And also, legally, they can stand on the sidewalk and smoke. But we're going to discourage that as much as possible. We want them to be around our back area or somewhere around there, to do that. But you really can't control the public once they get outside your building.
Well, you could control them in the back, too.
Yeah, control them in the back.
Any more questions for Dan?
Yeah. I also would echo and agree with Will. I think that feature's an awesome feature. I realize that'll pose some challenges for you because in that floor plan, it looked like you wanted to kick the entry off to the east, so probably you'd have a better patio or larger patio as opposed to coming up the middle of the building with an entry. So that's some challenges you guys can work out. But I would agree, in the way this elevation's set up, it acts like it wants to enter in the middle. But regardless, I think that is an iconic piece, and I would agree with Will.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it would look if we were to move it over to our entrance on the
No, I'm not suggesting move
right
it.
side.
Yeah.
You have to keep it in the middle. But there will be a big window there. You know, it's going to be, the patio's going to be back 12 feet. And now, you know, if we keep it, it'll be lined with our windows. With our patio.
Dan, is the footprint of the patio essentially the current retail store as it's set up in the building?
The front of the building is, anybody's been in Suzette's, the old candy store, it's abandoned now. It goes back about 16 to 17 feet. So we're only going to go back about 12 feet. So right there, so it's going to cut off that point right there. So it doesn't, like, they made all the candy in the back beforehand. So we're actually going to remove that wall. We'll have a separate wall that's 12 feet back with an entrance, a door entrance in there.
So just to clarify, you would propose to keep the entry feature that's around the existing door, but the door would still move?
Yes, we do want the door on the right. We'd like to have the door on the right side.
No, that was my thought.
Okay.
I mean, we can definitely with the architect and see what we can do with that. So,
Any other questions? CJ?
Has this been passed by the Urban Design Review Board?
Doesn't go to them.
It doesn't,
No.
can it be requested to go? He's kind of asking for help with design.
Their purview is if there's city financial assistance in the project, so there's nothing that requires them to go to the Urban Design Review Board.
And then my other question is about the landscaping. And I don't know who has the answer to this, but you're recommending the Ingersoll streetscape pattern. I've been hearing rumors that that is changing. Is that true, false? Can somebody help me with that?
I'm not sure on that.
I don't believe that any changes to be made would impact the plant material palette that we'd be using right here.
And you
correct?
you talk about existing trees making it impractical to provide evergreens. Can you elaborate on that recommendation?
Sure, that's in the back along the rear, the rear property line. There are existing trees there. Our normal buffering requirements would require evergreen plantings, additional trees, but with the existing canopy there, and then also the shallow depth, normally we would require 10 feet, but 5 feet's being proposed. We felt that it was reasonable just to do shrubs, the fence, and retain the existing trees. We're supportive of 5 feet versus 10 feet because that basically eliminates a parking stall. And in this area, while it's, you know, as I've mentioned earlier, you know, built out historic urban area, we still should try to maximize parking where we can. And I think this is a fair trade-off.
And my last question is, we already have quite a few bars on Ingersoll. Have we heard anything from the other bar owners?
They've gone before the zoning board adjustment for a conditional use permit. There's a criteria in the zoning ordinance of that process and the criteria that the board has to make decisions on. They were granted a conditional use permit. You know, certainly everybody within 250 feet of the site is noticed and can participate in those hearings and this hearing as well. But I don't know beyond.
The use has been approved.
That's correct.
It's a site plan review at this point. So.
I understand that, but we're also a planning commission, so I feel like we have to ask some additional questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know which one of you wants to answer the question about when the shed was torn down along the retaining wall or the existing wall behind there. There's I don't know if it's blackjack painted on the wall, or if it's tar paper or what it is, but there's just a big black square on the wall behind that. Does the dumpster enclosure shield that, or is there any plans to change what's back there now with the landscape plan in the back? Does anybody know what I'm talking about, or did I invent that?
Exactly what.
Name and address.
I'm George Chris. I'm the previous owner of Suzette's Candies. I ran the business for about 33 years and finally come to the end, so we try to get somebody else to do some business there. But the shed in the back, it was, they turned down for additional parking spaces. And there was, actually it was metal. It was metal pieces around, and it was covered with the metal. It was blackjack below. That's what you want to know?
No.
Okay.
That isn't what
Can
I
you repeat the answer, the question?
There's blackjack along the entire wall behind it where the shed used to be, and it's still there. What's going to happen to it now?
Blackjack?
Black paint, it's black. It's black where the shed was on the wall back there. What's going to happen to that?
Is it going to be removed, covered up, painted, left alone?
We're gonna put the privacy fence up on that back area, the 6 feet back there, 6-foot privacy fence, so that will all be covered up and stuff on that. I'm not sure what, but yeah, it's gonna be landscaped professionally, back there.
Maybe you and I can walk back there and look at it.
It'll be covered up, okay? Any other questions for George, Dan, or Michael?
Can we get Mr. Chris' address and name in the record, please?
2315 Ashworth, West Moines.
The applicant done presenting? Anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Anyone opposed to the application, please come forward. Name and address, please.
Good evening. My name's Christine Manbeck. I live at 675 Harwood Drive in Des Moines. I'm the business manager of County First, which is located at 2819 Ingersoll, which is a property next door. We are pretty intimately familiar with the building next door, as we've been there since 1998 after moving out of downtown. I have several questions, so I'm not sure how to present or ask questions. Do I just ask you?
Ask away, we'll figure out how to.
Okay, I mean, I have some comments, but I have some questions too. How many of the surrounding property owners are supportive or not supportive of this becoming a tavern?
Staff, any way to know that?
We only had the one response card that was passed around.
That was somebody from behind, so.
Many of the businesses there have stopped in to say what's going on, but also that they sent in cards, and maybe it was to Board of Adjustment, but uniformly they said they were opposed to this becoming a tavern. Does Plan and Zone then, Jason, send out another card again, or what's the process here?
We send out the cards for the Board of Adjustment hearing on the conditional use.
Okay.
And so whatever cards came back for that hearing came back, the Board of Adjustment held their hearing and decided to go ahead and approve.
In
the
spite
use.
of
In spite of opposition.
in spite of the
In
opposition?
spite of opposition.
Okay.
So on site plans, we send out a notice and ask people to come in and look at the site plan in our office. And if they come in, we'll give them a card if they want, but we don't mail out a card as part of the site plan review. We mail out a letter inviting them to come to the office and look at the site plan so they can go through that.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Sure.
The letters are mailed to property owners.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What is the lighting situation back there for security purposes?
I think the owner would have to answer that. Dan?
Lighting, We are putting lights on the outside of the building, for the back parking area, and probably one light on the side as they walk up also. It'll be in the city or, or on the ordinance and stuff.
Okay, okay,
So, thank you.
okay. I've got a couple comments. One is that according to our 12, 14 years in that site and being part of the Ingersoll change to make it a neighborhood pedestrian commercial, to see the beautiful landscaping that's been done, but also to see the mix of businesses there, many of them in businesses that are owned in owner-occupied buildings. We've got a buttload of taverns and restaurant bars on Ingersoll already. I don't know what's meant by, Mr. Norris said it won't be a dive bar. Is it also to be a restaurant? Because I know most of you on the Plan and Zone Commission, I know you're familiar with Ingersoll Avenue, and I know you know that there are a lot of bars and restaurants. We have Star Bar 2 doors from us. I mean, there are lots of places where you can buy liquor and you can dine. Is this just a bar?
Yes, it'll be just a bar.
Okay,
That's why we went to the zoning.
okay. With a bar comes a number of challenges, as you know. Our neighborhood association, both the business and the Ingersoll Park Business Neighborhood Association, have been dealing with Ingersoll Dinner Theater. Problems after hours, problems with determining who's holding the liquor license, gunshots at night, neighborhoods being upset about the activity that goes on after hours. So for us, a tavern that's just a tavern, just the drinking and the things that come with that, people standing on the sidewalk smoking, is not real attractive. We're an upscale business. There are several upscale businesses on our side of the street. And so people drinking, open air drinking with the noise that is attendant to that and the cigarette smoking is not attractive to our customers. Number two, I talk about the lighting because there were problems before when Palmer's redid the parking lot, which is in back of our building, with the neighbors. The elevation rises a little bit, and so part of it goes down and then it rises a little bit. So security lighting bothers the neighbors behind. So I think that has to be looked at to make sure that it's secure for the customers and also secure, and also doesn't bother the neighbors back there. Parking, 13 places. What is the occupancy that's anticipated in this bar for 13 places?
Our parking standards are based on square footage, but
Okay.
I don't know if the architect did a building code analysis.
We have a 13, but we have agreement with the Palmers to use the park lot, and they can use a driveway through because we can close that end there, and we have another 4 parking spaces available if we do that, because I own the property and I can do it. But we have agreement with Palmer to drive through so they can use the both parking lot and we can use their parking lot.
Okay.
So that's the deal.
Okay. Let me tell you how the parking lots are used. They're all connected in the back. Star Bar customers use our parking lot. Palmer's employees use the best parking lots, best parking spaces at Palmer's. Palmer's pass through to get to Ingersoll, it's wide. There's plenty of room to get 2 cars, ingress and egress, but it's on a slope. It's slippery in the winter. I'm not sure how people are going to get into this building, but we saw today on this new built-up parking lot with at least a 2-foot drop, a woman hang up her car trying to get out of where these new parking places are. So I don't know if there's going to be some sort of barrier. I don't know if there's going to be signage. I don't know what the deal is. But on the north side, it's going to be slippery. It's going to be dark. We're going to need lighting. And it's just going to be dangerous there. So I think that 13 places is going to put people into other people's parking lots, and if there's an agreement with Palmer's, that's great, but I see that there's going to be a huge parking problem there. Third one, or fourth one, I guess, is just generally good neighbors. Is a tavern a good neighbor? Is a tavern supportive of upscale retail? Don't know, but what we heard from the other neighbors, business owners, is that we're not seeing how that's possible. We'd like to see a balance there. in the neighborhood. Not sure how a tavern is retail business that we would like to see. And so I'm speaking on behalf of probably half a dozen other businesses in that immediate area of the tavern that are opposed to it. So I wish they were here, but thank you.
Any questions for Christine? Greg?
I have one for staff.
Staff? Any for Christine? Tim?
I'm just curious, what businesses are you speaking on behalf of?
We spoke to Ton Stom. We talked to, I don't know all their names, the ones that just would come in and leave notes for the owners. Obviously can't speak because he's the mayor. But whoever's down from his business, someone who works at Star Bar. I did not talk to Hutch, the owner. Two people that are down in that area, down where the coffee shop is. Again, people would leave notes and I just pass them on. So I'm not sure anyone really knew about this hearing. I think I asked, just because I was out of town for the Board of Adjustment and didn't know quite what to do. If you need names, if this is the only hearing, I don't feel comfortable saying, well, so-and-so said. I don't think that's right. I think they need to be here themselves. But I would get that information to you if there's time, and if there's not, so be it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Any other questions for Christine? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else opposed? Okay, I've closed the public hearing. Time for rebuttal. Michael, Dan, George, anybody? Oh, somebody else. Name and address.
I'm Dave Raftall, 4601 Southwest 9th, Raftall Inc. I'm working on the tenant improvements for these guys. And Karen Ann is my daughter, and she's Dan's girlfriend. So they're future fiance. I can have, since I've been involved from the whole process, just on the concerns of the business owners. When you go through the Board of Adjustment, they do the mailing, 300 feet. We received, I think, 2 negative responses. We met with the homeowners association. They gave us a letter of support, so we had no problem with them. Met with Ted, who's the head of the business association, or the.
No, I'm not.
Ted,
But you did meet with me.
Okay, but isn't there a business association?
Yes, there is, and I'm not the head of it.
But you're in the association. Anyway.
I met with you.
All right, and so we talked to Joe Palmer. What's that? Joe Palmer, and Joe was very concerned that we would not become a restaurant because his problem was parking for his business during the lunch hours. So he said, well, if you're just a tavern, a bar, I have no problem with that. We don't conflict on hours. The parking will work out. You know, lunch is my deal. Dinner, we do dinner, but it's not that big. You know, we're good with that. So he came down and appeared at the adjustment, stated those objections, and at the end he said, well, as long as it's a bar, that'll be fine. So, based on the information from the Board of Adjustment and now the Planning and Zoning responses from residents and business owners in the area that gets the cards, I don't think we really had objections. You know, the ones that we did, I think we talked to and got it worked out.
Any questions for Dave? Thank you. Close the public hearing. Julie?
I will move staff, but I have a comment too and a question.
Go ahead.
To Dan or Michael, whomever, what is the hours of operation for your business?
Hours of operation, as it stands right now, is going to be 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On Sundays, it will open up a little earlier due to football, and it will go till the closing time of bars.
So is it like a sports?
No, it's going to be more like like a whiskey bar. That's what our theme's kind of going to be. We're still working on that a little bit. We're not going to have a lot of TVs. We're only going to have about 4 TVs. So it's going to be a nice little gathering place.
Okay.
People and stuff. And,
okay.
You know, like I said, we're not looking for the person who turns 21 years old at midnight and wants to drink till 2. We're looking for the professional, the doctors, the lawyers, those professionals around our area.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment? Ted, go ahead. I will say that Dave and Dan really did make an effort to reach out to myself, Mike Hutchison that owns Star Bar, and Joe Palmer. To my knowledge, those are the ones I know that they spoke with. When I first heard about this, my inclination was we don't need another bar in such a short span. There are several liquor licenses in the district, and then I come to find that there isn't any legal way that they could have denied them access to a liquor license if they went through the process that they did, and they did. Because my business is in the district, just a couple doors away, not as close as the mayor. But I guess I thought as a business owner, not as a commissioner on P&Z, my recourse was to have a discussion with them and try to understand what kind of business people they were. They've made several assurances to me that they've made again here tonight that they intend to police these kinds of things. They don't. They're not going to be going after the so-called Court Avenue crowd, and that they'd like to be a more upscale establishment. As a neighbor, I intend to hold them at their word on that. And I do work as a consultant with the SMIT in the district. I, in the past, have been the president of the Chamber of Commerce, but not for several years in the district. I am on the board of the West Side, on the Ingersoll Business Association board. So I do get to hear lots about what goes on in the district. I think most people had the same kinds of concerns as me. You struggle, I think, when you're in that hospitality business with the food court concept versus having another neighbor to compete with you. Does it bring more people, or is it just flat competitive with your business? We don't know. We'll find out, I guess. But anyhow, I guess I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to vote, given some of these things. But I will say that they have reached out and they have made several assurances that they would do what they said they were going to do. Mike, go ahead.
Just for the commission's benefit, the Board of Adjustment, in their approval of the bar or tavern, as part of that approval, one of the conditions is that if the zoning enforcement officer believes it's a nuisance property, they can take that back to the Board of Adjustment for revocation of the conditional use permit. So that's fairly standard language in all the approvals now, and a lot of that has been in response to concerns about problem properties. So I do know that was a condition of approval on the bar tavern use at this site. So Ted's concerns clearly could be, if there were concerns after this opens, those could be relayed to the zoning enforcement officer and appropriate action could be taken. Thank you. Yeah.
Question for Jason or Mike. This is already NPC zoning, right?
Correct.
And doesn't NPC zoning by right allow bars and taverns? With the conditional use for it. So I'm having a hard time understanding how we've been talking the whole time about the bar and whether we want the bar or the tavern or not, and I don't think we really have anything to do about that here. It's a Board of Adjustment issue.
As I indicated, the use was granted.
Right.
So we're now looking at a site plan.
Right, yeah, I don't think there's anything we can do about it.
Mr. Chair, I have a question I'd like to ask my colleague here to the right, if she would entertain a friendly amendment to include language saying, in addition to the staff recommendation, to retain the aluminum facade feature as is, which would mean that even if this no longer operates as a bar, if it is passed tonight, at least some feature from the building's history would remain for a future occupant.
I would agree with that friendly amendment.
Anybody else?
I appreciate hearing from Ted about the outreach that the prospective owner or the owner made. But I guess I'm still wrestling with the concern that because there were so many questions raised that Tina raised, who was the outreach, who was privy to this outreach? I guess you explained that for the Board of Adjustment vote, that notices went out and individuals had a chance to comment on that, and I assume those are the property owners. So the outreach that was made, it sounds like there was a select group to satisfy additional concerns. I just am curious, I don't know if anyone can answer this right now, why Tina still has these questions that obviously were not addressed to her previously.
I think maybe the applicant could speak and maybe could schedule a meeting with additional property owners adjoining their property, but the notices are mailed by code to the owners of property adjoining within the 300-foot distance.
So that's the requirement?
That's required under our code. So the city mails those notices.
Okay.
The applicant can explain the additional meaning. I think you indicated you had the support of the neighborhood.
Yes, we met with the neighborhood association. We met with them, and they showed them our plans or like that, and they're very positive about it. We met with Palmer very quickly, Mr. Palmer, and he kind of had a little iffy on that. Of course, concerns, if I had a business in Ingersoll, I'd have a little concern too. So we met with him, met with Ted, met with Star Bar also, talked to him.
So these are people that you assumed because of the proximity?
Because how close they were and stuff. And plus, Star Bar is a bar competition and Palmer's and stuff. And to tell you the truth, when I moved here in January from Flagstaff, and we went around to the different neighborhoods from East Village to the downtown area looking for a nice place to go. And Ingersoll has just been, everybody just talks positive about Ingersoll. And when I was on a plane flying in from Arizona the other day, told somebody we're thinking about going into Ingersoll, and they were like, oh man, that's the place to be. So that's one reason why we wanted to be in that neighborhood also. So, because all the improvements were done.
I guess the question would be, would you reach out to the adjoining property owners and talk with?
We're good neighbors. I mean, we want to be like Allstate.
We're next door.
Yeah.
We missed you somehow. I don't have any notice of whatever Ingersoll business meeting you had. Maybe we just have it. Ted, was there a meeting or?
No, we just met with him individually. Yeah. I'll be more than happy to meet with you. Any concerns, questions?
Well, don't say that you got the approval of the neighborhood association and you didn't meet with them.
I mean, the Woodland Heights neighbors, the homeowners.
Can we redirect our conversation up here?
Yeah.
I have a question then, please, of the architect. You heard in the public hearing the serious concern concerning lighting on the property, and we haven't discussed that. You've also heard the concern to be a good neighbor. And so my recommendation is that you go an extra mile or 2 or 3 in being a good neighbor and listening to what these people say in terms of lighting as a security need for the property. Would you be willing to do that?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, we're willing to work with anybody, any suggestions, anything like that. And once we're up and running, we have more than, anybody wants to come in and comment, whatever, anything to do on that. I particularly hate trash. Being from the resort business, I used to walk, we had a huge parking lot at Little America, a huge truck lot. I had to go down and pick up trash every morning because I can't stand to have trash in our areas. And I understand how other businesses too. We made sure that every business around us did not have any trash from our existing businesses and stuff.
Thank you. I think we're going to call the vote here. All those in favor of Shirley's, go ahead.
I just wondered if that amendment was accepted. I don't remember hearing that.
Yes, it was.
Did that include the lighting?
No.
It's not offered.
Do you want to add something?
I would recommend that.
Would you like to add something, Shirley?
Okay, with the discussion that we've had, perhaps Michael or Dan can meet with the appropriate individuals to determine lighting, not only for the business district, but like Christina mentioned, be considerate of the neighbors that are there as well.
Our code specifies minimum lighting levels and maximum lighting levels. It also mandates you can't have light shining onto the adjoining properties. They have to be shielded so that there's a protection.
Okay.
Obviously, there's some existing lighting that's grandfathered, but on a new use, they would have to comply with our current regulations for lighting.
Is that clear? Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to vote on Shirley's motion for approval, and that includes the retaining of the architectural feature on the front plus appropriate lighting. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? CJ? CJ is opposed. Motion passes. On to item 6. Request from Atwater Group represented by Nick. I'm not going to try that one. Strategist. For review and approval of a site plan as a condition of the rezoning for property located at 3915 Southwest 9th Street to allow development of an 8,320 square foot limited retail store subject properties owned by Muto Company and Thomas and Don Cooper. Jason.
Photograph showing the subject property on the northeast corner of Southwest 9th and Watrous Avenue. This is the aerial showing the area. Response map. Nobody came in, submitted cards for the site plan. This property was rezoned, excuse me, the eastern half of the property was rezoned recently, so this may look familiar to you. It was earlier in this year. There were some zoning conditions that were placed on that, and I'll just go ahead and refresh your memory on that and what those conditions are. Any commercial site development shall be located away from existing residential uses to the extent feasible, given existing topography, by minimizing parking setbacks along public streets and reducing on-site maneuvering aisles to the extent possible while providing adequate maneuvering for delivery trucks. Provision of 75% brick, stone, and masonry block material on the first floor of all 4 walls, or the 360 architecture, if you will. Any freestanding sign shall be a monument sign. A sidewalk connection be provided from the public walk to the store entrance. Use of any retaining wall shall be minimized, and any site plan for development of the property shall be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this is coming back before you, not because, you know, it's an NPC site plan or something like that where we normally bring it back. This was a zoning condition for your review. I think that you can tell by the zoning conditions there was a little bit of concern at the zoning stage about how the site lays out, and there's certainly some different things that, from topography on the site and its relationship to 9th Street, trying to minimize having a retaining wall where this is at a much different grade than the street, to trying to move the building away from residential uses. So there was a lot has gone into laying this out and trying to work with the zoning conditions. There were meetings with adjoining property owners and the city traffic engineer and the staff report. I'm not going to recite it, but there was analysis done on the lighting system and the traffic counts. A lot of work done there to get us to where we are today. We are recommending approval. We do have some conditions. In talking with the applicant's engineer, really the only thing that has been a point of discussion with how to handle is there's a 50-inch or 44-inch to 50-inch oak that is right now would be generally, I believe, in this area in the parking lot, and we hope to work with them on figuring out a way to save that. In talking with, refreshing the conversation with the applicant today or their engineer, there has been a lot of work, and I'm going to let them speak to the different alternatives that they have gone through. It was refreshing to hear how extensive the different ways they've looked at this. But at the end of the day, they're basically trying to balance all the needs and the concerns, the impacts that were identified at the zoning stage, balance the impacts of the grade changes on the site and how that relates to moving this driveway around. And at this point, they do not believe that they have an alternative to make it work to keep that tree. They did show this being scooted down with the island being over here, but the city arborist didn't feel that the way they had laid it out would work. There wouldn't be enough. It'd be too much of an impact on the root system of the tree. And I'll let them talk about this in greater detail, but they have some constraints about the widths they need for their trucks and also the depth of the pavement. And I'll turn it over to the applicant to describe that in a little greater detail. Here we go. I'll show you so here's the grading plan. I'll show you the landscaping plan, and then we'll go to the building elevations. So they are showing compliance with the mitigation requirements, and then also compliance with our standard buffering and parking lot perimeter requirements. And then here's the architecture of the proposed building. Be happy to answer your questions you have for staff, otherwise turn over to the applicant.
Greg?
Two questions for you, Jason. Do you happen to have the site plan from the first time?
I do not. From the rezoning, like a concept, I do not.
I was trying to remember, and maybe the applicant will answer it, but it seemed like they had a big retaining wall out front in the corner, and the site was raised up, and I'm trying to remember all that, so maybe you can go through.
Yeah, and I think that there was that zoning condition about trying to avoid using a retaining wall that spoke to that, and but I'll let the applicant kind of describe that a little better. I think
And then
you get a
you
better
can
answer.
explain to me the tree mitigation process. Do you have to get approval, or is it a right that if you want to take a 50-inch tree down, you can, you just have to replace it with the required amount? Or, I mean, can you by right take it down?
That's correct.
I'm sorry?
Yes, you can.
So you can, okay.
So the applicant owns the tree. Is that correct, or is it a city tree?
It's on their site. That is correct. And I'll be honest with you, I went into this day really hoping by the time we got here tonight that we'd have a solution. I talked through every creative idea I could think of, and not that there isn't one still out there I haven't thought of, but.
So Jason, just to clarify, in the options that were looked at the zoning hearing, there were a lot of concerns about traffic on the east-west street and where the drive location was in relation to these houses to the east. You also have the C-store, existing C-store immediately to the south of this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have conflicts with those drive approaches also. There was not a zoning condition about where the driveway had to be located.
No, and actually that was my go-to today. I was hoping that we could work to have the driveway to the east, even though I know that would impact, more of an impact to the neighbors and maybe not be well received by some, but it would save the tree. But the grade change is pretty significant here, and to get it all to work, it just was going to cause problems with their trucks accessing the point, or the property, excuse me.
I looked at this site, and it looks to me like there's two driveways already there. Isn't there two driveways already going into this property? And we have this oak tree that, and you say you have searched for solutions to this. I'd like to challenge the architect on this, because we have our mitigation ordinance here, and I don't know if you're from Des Moines, but it is so weak. And to take this tree out just defies logic, to take out a tree that is probably 200-some years old, to allow a truck to turn? I mean, we are just destroying the universe by decisions like this.
Just that this is an aerial, you can see it looks like 2 remnant residential driveways.
Which is the tree you're talking about? Which tree?
Right there. I'm sure it's that first one right there.
The big one taking up all the space in the aerial.
I haven't made comments tonight, so I'm going to jump in on this one. I have worked on a lot of site plans in my years and have learned the very hard way that unless that oak tree is protected by at least within its drip line, that it's not going to live long-term. And it sure looks like to me that if we withhold development outside that drip line, that there's nothing left. And as much as I'd like to have that, I mean, I think we ought to respect that tree more than we do, but we don't. And they don't have a big enough site, and I would just oppose any weak-need response to that tree. If it's just a little tiny island, forget about it. My 2 cents, thank you. Any questions for Jason? Applicant, please. Name and address.
Jeremy Shepard, 7157 Vista Drive in West Des Moines. Civil engineer with Olson Associates on the project. Apologies from Nick that he could not attend tonight. This is a very important project to Family Dollar as well as the applicant, Atwater Group. They're looking forward to the investment in the community in addition to some other potential sites in the city of Des Moines. It's a great opportunity for them to place their business here, and I'd like to maybe respond to Greg's question on the rezoning site plan. The initial site plan was located, had the building further to the north, closer to the residential. And so as part of the city council's recommendation to move the development away from the residential, we went ahead and did that, pushed it south toward the parking setbacks and also west as far as we could. So I believe that the landscape plan that Jason presented really shows the improvements going along the north and the east, following the buffer requirements for the plantings in addition to the mitigation requirements of this site, obviously being substantial with the trees that are currently on site. So I would like to start with some of the alternatives we did look at. I'd like to do a little discussion about how the truck currently will access the site based on the current site plan. Access is off of the secondary road onto the south, which is Watrous. The intention is that the truck would enter the site, extend to the west side of the building, and then would need to reverse back into the loading zone. So with the site that's currently shown in your packets, the site works with the truck. To try and...
Can you show us the tree in each of those?
I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
Jason. About right here.
Can you estimate its drip line? I mean, it's real.
It has a 60-foot diameter spread.
Can you kind of roughly sketch that based on a 20-foot parking space scale?
Well, it's going to go to the back of those parking stalls across the aisle.
This is a little zoomed in picture. This is showing the option with relocating the island pushed west.
And that's the canopy, not...
Yes, yes, that trunk is right here, and then the canopy is as I've drawn it. So this is the option that we presented to the city's arborist, understanding that we also have concerns about root survival, covering up the root zone, in addition to The way the grades work out, we are proposing 3 feet of cut to try and save the tree. Obviously, that's a concern because we're going to be getting into that root zone right away. Basically, the option, the first option we presented was not a viable solution to the city's arborists. So, second option we looked at was trying to shift the building to the north. Some of the constraints that we have on the site is we need to have the sanitary sewer as well as the storm sewer from the Twitch Pond running to the north side out to 9th Street. Jason mentioned that the city council's condition was to keep the structure away from the residential development as much as we could, and moving the building north would thus be against that condition. Not saying that the commission couldn't agree to moving the building north, but we have some constraints doing so. So the requirement of the truck really needs the 40-foot dimension to provide that full reverse turnaround to get back into the loading zone.
How far could you move it north if you did?
We were looking at about 10 to 11 feet that we would have to move it to make at least the pavement far enough away from the trunk to allow the root system to survive. We still have the issue of the cut, which should still be in that 2 to 3 foot range. We talked about a retaining wall right at the back of the curb. That solution would probably present problems if the truck were to clip the retaining wall right there. The third option that we looked at was, as Jason mentioned, trying to move the drive to the east. Jason did mention that we have a grading concern where we have about 2 feet of additional fall that we would need to make up in a short distance because of the grade of Watrous is coming up still. At this point, we would have a grade issue. The site is really constrained by the amount of fall that we have on the West Drive. We have an existing slope of about 5 feet in its existing condition, and that will be cut down to about 3.5 feet just to make sure that we can have a reasonable access. The other concerns that we had with having the drive on the east was light pollution from headlights. That was one of the concerns expressed by the neighbors as part of the meeting Jason mentioned. Directly to the south, there are existing residences, and the currently approved location, or the current location we show, is roughly right here, which would be not a hindrance to those adjacent folks. So with that, I appreciate any comments you may have or questions for me.
Anyone? Greg?
I think I remember last time mentioning, and so I'll mention it again, I'd love to see make an effort to make a pedestrian connection from the Watrous Avenue or 9th Street up to the building. Right now, I feel like you just got to walk through all the parking lot and the cars, and I do believe there'll be people in the neighborhood that walk up here. So I'd really like to see you make an effort to sort of take a sidewalk up through an island and make it sort of clear so that people can get up there. Second, I have a little concern, even though I don't know that I can give you a good solution, about the massiveness of the detention area. It looks like it's about a 45-degree slope, or maybe not quite that much, but it's a pretty good slope and a pretty deep hole, 7-ish feet. Can be unsightly, can be dangerous, can be all those things. I sure wish there was a solution that was economically viable besides this. I understand how you end up here, but it's not great. I don't know if any of those you're interested in responding to or not, but.
I'd like to talk about the access, the pedestrian access that we did add to the site, and I don't know, Greg, if...
Oh, I didn't see that.
We did add the connection off of Watrous through the ADA stalls and then into the building.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what you had in mind or if it was maybe.
Yeah,
a different
I don't
location.
have that in my drawings, or I don't see it. Anyway, it's something.
I think that was a staff comment through
I remember it somewhere.
in the administrator's
I just didn't see it in my
comments.
drawing.
And in response to the detention pond, because of the way the site works out, the topography of the site works out, we have to capture the drainage at the western end, and we cannot pipe it back to the pond first, so we're actually putting a control structure right here. And once you do that, the pond has to be a little bit deeper to make those elevations work. So
We actually found on a project that, and I don't remember what the term is called, but basically the inverted culverts that are set in the rock below the ground, that by the time you factor in all the cost to pave and grade and move dirt around, that sometimes those are viable options, but, and then you can park on top of them. You know, you gain or have green space. So anyway, just a thought. That's it.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions? CJ?
I would just like to, in deference to our chair, who's ready to throw the oak tree out, I know there's also a 20-inch buckeye tree there, and the environmental benefits of these trees are, they can't be measured. And even though you may have to sever some of the roots on the oak, it maintains some environmental value while you have other trees growing to replace it, and I understand you're going to do some mitigation. So I would encourage you to try to find a way just to save the oak until there's a few years. We have trails that have went closer than that to oaks that are still alive and thriving. So just because you might have to encroach on a few roots, I wouldn't throw out the whole baby with the bathwater, if you would please consider that. That's,
and I would tend to agree with the encroachment of the pavement along the north side, possibly touching 20 to 30% of the root zone. I think the biggest concern that we have is the 3 feet of cut that's going to change the root zone in the immediate area. If we can't provide enough coverage for at least half the canopy width, we're definitely going to be affecting the root structure with the cut.
But they do it all the time, they repair sidewalks, put in trails, and there's trees still standing for 10 years now that I've known.
Understand.
Tim?
How you doing?
Good.
You been involved at all with the Southwest 9th merchant people that have a committee going on?
I have not been.
Okay. There is a Southwest 9th merchant committee, and I think it's something that would be very advantageous of you to probably get involved in. If you want to see me after the meeting, I'll give you a time and a date of their next meeting.
Sure.
I'm sure that you would probably like their support. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Anyone here to speak against the application? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and accept the motion. Tim will move. Staff. Any other discussion? CJ?
I just have one question. Item number 2 on the staff recommendation says reevaluate removal. Are we still reevaluating that, or have?
I think from the staff perspective that we have, and that we're supportive of removing the tree.
The staff is supporting removal of the tree?
We've sat down with them and gone through a lot of different alternatives, and some of them the city arborist hadn't been supportive of, so.
Well, in your staff recommendation, it still says reevaluate.
Yeah, this was written on Friday, and we met with them today.
Yeah,
That's
so
what
we
you're
have,
saying, right?
since, that's correct.
So are we removing this item from the staff rec?
In essence, you can. I mean, it's just saying, we've done it. we're giving you letting you know in advance that instead of making this decision a week later, that's where we are. So if it's easier just to strike it, then we can do that.
Will?
I have just a question for information. About 10 or 15 years ago, a very similar situation arose in the city of Charles City, Iowa. It's up on the north. They were rebuilding a city hall, and there was a bur oak tree of this similar size and age. And the comment was that the drip line would not be sufficient for the tree to survive and so forth. I was back there maybe 7 years later, and lo and behold, the tree still was there. So I respect, Greg, your comment and so forth. Is this a different diameter that the tree would not have in this instance? Is this, you're the doctor, what's the prognosis of the tree surviving? 1 out of 10, 5 out of 10? We don't know.
If they're cutting 3 feet around the tree, 0.
I think the municipal arborist should make that decision.
He already has. CJ, I don't want to argue.
I'm not. I'm
What-
just saying,
Yes,
it's
you
in the
are.
recommendation, and I'm just saying, we're approving this.
The problem is, we as a society do not value that tree. Because if we did, we would have a stronger ordinance for tree mitigation, and these people would select another site. We don't. The city could buy that site and save that tree. We haven't. The neighbors could do that. The way our system works is, we have mitigation, which is way minimal. They bought the site and they're allowed to do it. I wish they could save it, but my opinion is we need to be serious about it and not just wingy-ding some 10-foot wide island around it, cut all the dirt away and hope the thing lives. It's not going to happen. We have a motion we're going to vote on. Those in favor, raise your right hand.
And the motion is staff.
Staff, move staff. Yes.
Striking number 2.
Striking number 2. Those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? CJ and Jackie.
I'm abstaining, I wasn't here for the presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes. The other items, election of a second vice chair. CJ's informed me that there's not been time to pursue the matter, so we'll push that off until.
The other half of the committee is not here, so.
Okay. And committee and director reports. Arno doesn't have any reports, so Mike?
No director's report.
So that means we're done.
Here we are again. Haven't seen you around in a while. Where have you been? New look, you found your style.